An ordinary mortal, by chance, obtained a mysterious jade pendant with a 1-acre spiritual field, and embarked on the long journey of cultivating immortality and farming. Female lead article, Mortal Flow, Farmland Flow, keywords of the novel. Xianyu asking for no pop-ups, Xianyu asking for TXT complete collection download, Xianyu asking for latest chapter reading. Chapter 1. Jade Pendant. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 1 Jade Pendant Huaigua. Yongzhou. Yangshan Village. Huaying squatted by the stream, rolling up her sleeves and stirring the half-muddy river water, enduring the piercing cold and slowly exploring into the water. Finally, accompanied by a splash of water, a jet-black mud was scooped out of the water by her. This is an old piece of mud, dark brown, entangled with slightly withered water grass roots, and emitting a faint fishy smell. Sure enough, there's something inside. Huaying blinked her eyes and carefully looked at the mud in her hand, keenly detecting the object inside. That is a jade stone wrapped in mud and wrapped in grass roots, with only one small corner exposed. The color is very light, leaning towards gray. If you don't look closely, you may mistake it for just an ordinary stone. In order to observe more carefully, Huaying put the mud back into the water and stirred it again. Soon, as the stream became more muddy, the entire appearance of the jade was also revealed. It's not jade, it's a jade pendant. It is about the size of a child's palm, circular, with patterns carved on it, without any luster, and looks very antique. Huaying felt the jade pendant for the first time. In the past, she had only seen it on the decorations worn by the nobles in the town. It was much more beautiful than the one in her hand now. It was very green and beautiful, and some even emitted a faint fluorescence. Can anyone have left it here? Huaying looked left and right, and this was the closest creek to the village. In the distance was a big mountain, and no outsiders would come here usually. Only the villagers from her own village would come here to fetch water and do laundry. The most she saw were some small animals from the mountains. It seems that this jade pendant has been lost here for a long time. Take it home later and show it to my parents. Huaying didn't think much, carefully holding the jade pendant in her arms, stood up and walked towards the other side of the stream. Daniel, stop eating and go home. A green cow nestled by the river grazing heard a shout and turned its head to moo at her, as if responding to something. Huaying smiled happily, flipped over and rode on, driving the green ox towards the village. It seems like there's something big going on today. As soon as she returned to the village, Huaying felt the noise was extraordinary. Villagers came and went everywhere, with a joyful expression on her face. She stopped a familiar friend nearby and asked, "Dog, is there a happy event in our village? Why are all the adults in a hurry?" Guwa is a chubby little guy with a runny nose, but at the age of 7 or 8, he is only half the height of a cow. He can only look up and say, "Sister Arya, hurry home. Your mother is looking for you everywhere. We have people from our village." Arya is the nickname of Huaying. In their village, children call each other nicknames and never shout big names. Is someone here? Huaying is very curious, what kind of person has arrived that can make the adults in the village so nervous? Huaying, who couldn't figure it out, had to hurry home. As soon as she arrived at the door, she saw a simple-dressed woman anxiously looking around. "Mother. Girl, you've come back now. Hurry up, follow your mother to the village entrance." The woman quickly took small steps forward. "Mom, what kind of person has arrived in our village? Why are you all panicking? I'll talk to you about this later. Let's go to the village entrance first. Don't be too late, it will delay the matter." Huaying had just gotten off the back of the cow, and before she could ask clearly, she was pulled away by her mother without even considering tying it up properly. Fortunately, she walked and asked along the way, and finally understood what had happened. There are people from the village, including those from the Huadao sect, who are here to select entry-level disciples. This is a rare occurrence in decades. Yangshan village is located in a remote area, adjacent to the mountains, and is already a sparsely populated area. It is not surprising that martial arts sects like Huadao sect, which dominate a county, would recruit disciples from such a poor small mountain village. Hua Ying has little knowledge about the Huadao sect. She has never left the village much since childhood, and the farthest she has been is to see a doctor in the town. She has never seen the ups and downs of the martial arts world. For her, it was just a very distant thing. Moreover, it seems that the recruitment of disciples by the Huadao sect has nothing to do with her. Girl, this is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. I heard from your father that if you can become an entry-level disciple of this Huadao sect, you will not have to worry about food and clothing for most of your life. If you are lucky enough to learn a martial arts skill under a master's sect, you will be considered a prestigious figure in our Qingyang town in the future. The woman murmured. Qingyang town is the largest town within a radius of 100 miles, with a distance of 20 to 30 miles from Yangshan village. It is the place where the villagers of this small mountain village often interact with each other. They usually go to Qingyang town to sell some mountain goods or seek medical treatment. Mom, can I do it? Hua Ying looked down at her body, her voice low. She has been weak and sickly since childhood, and it doesn't seem like she can practice martial arts no matter what. Sigh, no matter what, we have to give it a try. I heard that these sects value qualifications very much, and anyone with good qualifications will be accepted. When the woman said these words, she was also very uncertain in her heart. As a rural woman in a mountain village, she didn't know exactly what qualifications were. Don't mention her, even if you ask the whole Yangshan village, you probably can't find anyone who knows. This word only spread throughout the entire village half an hour ago. The Huadao sect directly spoke out, saying that they only accept disciples with good qualifications, and not any disciples with poor qualifications. So, after careful consideration, each household called their own age-appropriate dolls and prepared to try the situation together. Hua Ying is not the only child in the family. She has 2 older brothers above her, but unfortunately she has already reached adulthood. At this age, if you want to join the Huadao sect to practice martial arts, you can't even think of it. On the contrary, it is Hua Ying. Although she is a girl, her age is quite suitable. She has just turned 9 years old this year and meets the age requirements of the Huadao sect for newly recruited disciples. 8 to 14 years old is the best age to lay a foundation in basic martial arts, and even with good talent, it is difficult to achieve success in the future beyond this age. Not long after, Hua Ying followed her mother to the village entrance, where many villagers had already gathered and a large area was overwhelming. In addition, her father was also present, and the 2 older brothers did not show up. It should have happened that she was going to the neighboring village to work as a helper during this period. Girl, come over quickly. A middle-aged man came waving, not very tall, with a friendly expression on his face. Hua Ying walked over and stood obediently beside the other party. In addition to her own father, Hua Ying also saw many children standing at the village entrance in small groups, laughing and playing. Gua, Erlengzi, Ernyo, Sanlizi, Denyo, and so on are all her daily playmates, and they all follow her parents and elders at home. In addition to these villagers, there are several strangers dressed in uniform, each holding swords and standing tall. Just as Hua Ying was secretly scrutinizing and pondering in her heart, the black-clad man in his 40s, the leader of these people, suddenly took a step forward and looked around at the villagers, saying loudly, "Dear fellow villagers and elders, today I, the Huadao sect, came to this place to open the mountain gate and receive such warm treatment. Jean would like to express his gratitude here. Next, if any children from various households are willing to join our sect, please step forward. Those who have passed the test can become our sect's entry-level disciples." This person is dressed in gorgeous clothes and has an extraordinary appearance. I'm afraid his status within the Huadao sect will not be very low. However, although he is a famous disciple of a major sect in the martial arts world, he speaks politely and has no airs, earning the respect of many villagers for a while. This senior, our child has a lot of qualifications and is willing to join your esteemed family. Senior, my child has been smart since childhood and can read and write easily. He is definitely skilled in martial arts. My child knows how to fight, one can fight several times. If he goes crazy, he can even fight his father. It's definitely right to accept him. The villagers rushed to push out their own dolls, as if they were afraid they wouldn't be able to get the entry-level spot. Everyone, be quiet. All the children are lined up according to their height, and those who are shorter should stand forward. The man in black calmly presided over the order on the field and arranged for 2 other disciples in blue to be responsible for surveying. Soon, there were about 30 children of appropriate age arranged in order, most of whom were boys, with only a few being girls. Hua Ying is also among them. Although her age is not very old, the girl is taller than boys of the same age at this age, so she ranks relatively late. Those in front of her queue are all 7 or 8 years old, and there are also some 11 or 12 years old. Then, under the command of the man in black, the 2 young men in blue began to inspect the qualifications of these children one by one. Zhang Dainyu, I won't pass. Li Erju, I won't pass. Sun Ergu, pass through. Han Tai, through. As time passed, amidst the cries of 2 young men in blue, the children who had passed the test were arranged to come together, while those who had not passed returned to their parents dejected. At this moment, Hua Ying looked at the fewer and fewer lines in front of her, feeling extremely nervous. Sweat had already sprouted from the palms of her manipulated hands. The number of people who passed was too small, and she watched helplessly as one child after another left, with only a few children passing the test. And surprisingly, all the few girls in the team were defeated. When inspecting the boys, the 2 young men in blue would even touch their heads and arms a few times. When it was a girl, they didn't even look much, as if they hadn't even considered it, completely ignoring it. Is this Huadao sect only accepting male disciples? Hua Ying had no high expectations of whether she could pass the test, which made her even more hesitant to think about it. Quickly, 2 young men in blue discovered her. Name: Hua Ying. Hua Ying no longer had any expectations in her heart and slowly announced her name. However, Hua Ying. It doesn't pass. One of the young men in blue shook his head and was immediately sentenced to death. Upon hearing this, Hua Ying breathed a sigh of relief, feeling secretly disappointed and suddenly feeling a hint of peace of mind. In this way, I don't have to leave my parents alone, which is also good. Wait a moment. At this moment, the black-clad man who had been watching from afar swept his gaze and suddenly spoke up to stop Hua Ying from leaving. End of this chapter. Chapter 2. Qingyang Town. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 2 Qingyang Town, bring her over. Yes, Director Zhang, the young man in blue answered, and immediately brought the bewildered Hua Ying to the black-clothed man. Director Zhang's eyes lit up as he carefully scrutinized the little girl from the mountain village in front of him. Seeing his appearance at around 8 or 9 years old, although dressed in simple gray cloth, his small hands and face were clean, and he also had strange white hair, which immediately aroused his interest. Little girl, what's your name? Hua Ying. Hua Ying timidly said. Hee, the name is quite nice. The glow of fireflies can also compete with the bright moon. Zhang Ji praised it beforehand, then pointed to Hua Ying's hair and asked, are you born with this white hair, or is there another reason? Returning to the senior, I was born like this. Oh, that's quite unusual. Director Zhang nodded and showed a sudden realization on his face. He no longer hesitated about the matter and continued to speak frankly, I see that you have average qualifications and no talent for martial arts. Although you cannot transform me into a disciple of the sword sect, Hua Ying was originally curious about what the other party called her to do when she suddenly heard these words and felt a surge in her heart. She thought to herself that it was indeed so. However, our sect still lacks a few maids. Although their treatment is not as good as that of ordinary disciples, they still have good food and drink, sleep well, and dress warmly. Would you be willing to do so? Director Zhang, a black-clad man, now had a smile on his face, which seemed inexplicably strange. A maid. Hua Ying was stunned for a moment. She first turned around and glanced at her parents in the crowd, then lightly bit her lips and tentatively asked. Can maids practice martial arts? Of course not. Upon hearing this, Director Zhang was taken aback, clearly not expecting the other party to have this issue. Hua Ying was greatly disappointed. Little girl, practicing martial arts can't be such a simple thing. The hardships involved are not something that you can understand at such a young age. Although our sect also has many young disciples, each of them is not an ordinary person. Women have higher requirements for martial arts practice than men, and it is not easy to learn. If you can't practice martial arts, then you won't be a maid. Although Hua Ying is young, she still understands what it means to be a maid in this world today, as she needs to sign a contract to sell herself. If you can practice martial arts, even if your talent is not good, there may still be a glimmer of hope after trying hard. If not, then she will never agree. Thinking of this, Hua Ying turned around and left. Wait a minute. Stop your steps. This matter is not a big deal either. If you insist on practicing martial arts, it's not impossible. As long as you make people comfortable to serve, everything else is up to you. Director Zhang's eyes flashed with a hint of brilliance, and his words conveyed an inexplicable meaning. Are you serious, senior? Hua Ying asked suspiciously. That's nature. Okay. Hua Ying nodded in agreement. She also didn't believe that the other party would deceive her for no reason. After all, she was a senior expert in a prestigious sect, so there was no need to lie to a child. However, in the future, I'm afraid I'll have to become a maid and serve tea, water, laundry, and bedding to people every day. However, this is not a difficult task for her. After all, as a child who grew up in a mountain village, she can still endure some hardships. Moreover, for the poor, serving the wealthy is not considered hardship. However, these are not important. Finding opportunities to practice martial arts is Hua Ying's goal. As long as she can become the prestigious figure in Qingyang town, in her parents' mouths, no matter how hard she works, it is worth it. She not only wants to change her own destiny, but also the fate of her parents and family. This is not only the expectation of her parents for Hua Ying, but also the decision in her own heart. Half a day later. A carriage slowly drove on a bumpy muddy road, with two young men in blue and a man in black riding on the leading horses ahead. Zhang Wu was riding on a horse, looking straight into the distance. He estimated that he would be in Qingyang town in 2 or 3 miles, and turned to his disciples beside him, saying, When you enter the town, you too will take these children to the east of the town to meet with Li and others and follow the command. We will depart tonight, and everything must be prepared properly. Don't be careless. Deacon, it's getting late today. Why don't you take a night off in Qingyang town and return to the sect tomorrow? A young man in blue exclaimed in surprise. It was already dusk, and the distant sunset was only a corner under the cover of the city. I have been making too many moves in Qingyang town in the past few days, and I'm afraid there may have been some rumors. If we delay for a while, there may be unexpected consequences. This is the instruction of Master Li, please don't ask too much later. Zhang Wu's face was solemn. I will prepare some things and meet with you later. Yes. The two in blue exchanged a glance and said in unison. Not long after, the distant town of Qingyang finally approached, and Zhang Wu instructed him to ride his horse into the city first, without knowing his whereabouts. Then 2 young men in blue drove into the town with the carriage. Hua Ying huddled in a corner of the carriage and woke up to hear the commotion outside. She casually tugged at the clothes of the children next to her and said, "Erlangzi, have we arrived at Qingyang town?" "Ah, Qingyang town. I don't know." Erlangzi seemed to have just woken up, with a bewildered expression on his face. They came out of Yangshan village, bid farewell to their families, and after the bumpy journey on the carriage, they were already exhausted. Unexpectedly, half a day had passed after just taking a nap, and now they were all confused wherever they went. "Sister Area, we are in town now. I saw a lot of people outside just now, and there are also people selling tomatoes on sticks." In the carriage, the youngest paparazzi was the clearest one. This kid was the youngest and had never been on a long journey before. Except for a few sad cries at the beginning, he was very energetic all the way, like a wild monkey. If it weren't for the other kids bothering him, he would have shouted and shouted long ago. "Let me take a look." Huaying rubbed her eyes, squatted by the window of the carriage, gently pushed open a small crack, and curiously looked out. "Tomatoes on sticks, 2 pennies a string, no acid, no money. Have a look. Eat wonton, a large wonton with thin skin and big stuffing." Although she had visited Qingyang town several times, Huaying was still amazed by the bustling scene before her. At the beginning of the light, there was a lot of traffic. The street was full of hawking. When she smelled the fragrant wonton, her little stomach began to cry out. The overwhelming appetite instantly swept away the low mood that Huaying had developed due to leaving home. She was not the only one greedily in the carriage, and the other children also gathered around, gazing eagerly at the scene outside the car. "Sister Area, will we live in this town in the future? That's great. When I earn money, I must taste the taste of tomatoes on sticks." At this moment, 7 or 8 children crowded into this small carriage, filled with longing for the outside world while also feeling a bit proud. They are all extremely talented martial arts practitioners personally selected by the senior members of the Huadao sect. They only wait to officially join the sect and learn a martial arts skill. After a few years, they can dominate the martial arts world and be respected by everyone. They only wait to return to the village again and allow their parents and family to share their wealth and glory. In this scene, the young man's mood and energy were full of excitement, fantasizing about the bright clothes and angry horses. Huaying only looked out of the window for a while, didn't pause much, then withdrew her gaze and silently returned to her position. Unlike the selected children such as Erlangzi and Gua, who have average qualifications, she is now thinking more about how to plan her future sect life. "If everything goes smoothly, after entering the Huadao sect, I will first become a maid and then find time to practice martial arts." Provided that the deacon Zhang did not deceive her. As for whether there is a master to teach or whether she can enjoy the treatment of an ordinary disciple, Huaying dare not even think about it. She made up her mind that no matter what, she would first find a way to learn a martial art, and then explore her future cultivation problems. Qingyang town seems to be small. Shortly after the carriage entered the city, it stopped at a mansion in the east. 2 young men in blue clothes on horseback dismounted and lifted the curtains, shouting into the carriage. "Let's all come down. When we go in, no matter what we hear or see, we're not allowed to shout or shout. Otherwise, I don't care if someone throws us out." The children were startled by this person's words and quickly got out of the carriage, clustering together on the street. They looked at the mansion in front of them in confusion, not daring to make any noise. "Not bad." The disciple in blue nodded in satisfaction and then took a few steps up the steps in front of the mansion to call for the door. Not long after, a young man dressed in blue also opened the door of the mansion and let everyone in. "Wang and Lu, this is the last batch for today. Master Li is already in a hurry." The young man in blue who opened the door walked along the path. Lu and Wang looked at each other with a bitter smile and said, "Brother son, Yangshan village is too remote, and we dare not stop here for a while. Don't worry, today in 26 villages under Qingyang town, more than 300 children were gathered. Master Li is very satisfied and I don't think he will blame you too for this small matter. That's good. Brother Lu took a deep breath and quickly asked Brother Sun, Senior brother, I heard that we are leaving tonight. Is it necessary to be so urgent? Junior brother, it's not convenient for me to talk too much, but what's certain is that the earlier we leave, the better. Senior Sun seems to have a high status within the Huadao sect, but at this moment, he has vaguely revealed some of the insider information. Mo Fei Na, Lu Shidi was suddenly startled. Shoo. Senior brother Sun immediately fell silent. The three of them only talked for a moment, and the conversation was very quiet, without attracting the attention of the children behind them. The attention of Huaying and others was focused on the garden scenery inside the mansion and the decoration of the carved dragons and phoenixes in the courtyard, completely ignoring the conversation of these young men in blue. As they continued to deepen, they quickly arrived at a spacious open space in the backyard. Under the moonlit and starry night sky, there are many children of similar ages gathered here, with about a few hundred people in the dark. They either huddle together or sit together in groups of 3 or 2. The vast majority are boys, with only a few being girls like Huaying. These children saw the newly arrived Huaying and others sitting quietly on the ground without saying much, some even holding dry food and nibbling on it. End of this chapter. Chapter 3. Night Talk. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 3 Night Talk. Among them, under the distant eaves, a tall middle-aged man sat on a grand tutor's chair, looking at the new arrivals and turning his head to explain a few words to the people around him. The person next to him bent down and listened attentively, then turned around and ran towards Huaying. Han Deacon. The three disciples in blue looked at the person who came and raised their hands to edit, their faces full of respect. Han nodded without lifting his eyelids and ordered, distribute some dry food to these new arrivals and set off immediately. Yes. Senior Sun immediately called for a servant and carried a bucket of rice over. Take some dry food with you all, and wait until you're full before heading on the road. A few children haven't touched any food for a long time, and their stomachs have been starving for a long time. When they saw what they had eaten, they all rushed forward to grab it, fearing that they might not be able to eat enough later. Huaying was also very hungry. She squeezed her body and reached into the bucket to get it. At last, she only got 2 mixed flour mantou that were about to be dried. She first nibbled on half of it, it was as hard as a stone, and it was difficult to swallow without water. In the end, she only ate half of it and carried the remaining one into her arms to keep. Huaying is very clever and didn't eat too fast. She secretly learned a little bit of information from the conversation between Director Han and Senior Brother Sunday. Next, it seems that these children are still on their way. This discovery caught Huaying's eye. If she really had to travel further in the future, it was necessary to keep some dry food as a backup. Who knows if these sect experts will continue to distribute food to them along the way. With 1.5 mantou in her arms, Huaying's heart was at ease. At midnight, more than a dozen carriages were driving in rows on the path under the moonlight. Apart from the rolling wheels and the sound of horse hooves trampling on the ground, there were occasional whines from wild beasts in the deep mountains and jungles. At this moment, in a carriage located in the middle of the convoy, Huaying leaned against the wooden board next to the carriage door, her tender body hidden in the darkness trembling with the piercing cold outside the carriage. Although it was already late at night, she was completely drowsy and constantly observing the outside world. The other children in the carriage huddled together to keep warm, snoring incessantly and murmuring incessantly. The carriage continued to move forward, as if heading towards the mountains, and Huaying heard more and more animal sounds. This made her quite curious. The Huadao gate was just rushing late at night, but why didn't it take the main road and the small road, and instead walk towards the mountains? At this moment, separated by a carriage door, Huaying suddenly heard the subtle voices of 2 young people discussing. The long night is long, Wang Hu. After driving for several hours, there was no movement at all. I think that rumor is mostly false. Who said it's not true? Although our Huadao sect may not be considered a first-class sect in Huaigua, no one dares to easily provoke us in the territory of Dongqing County. I heard that the sect elders spent a lot of money to invite a high-level official from the state city to take charge of this matter, which is really a big deal. The person in charge of guarding this carriage is still the two young men in blue, one surnamed Lu and the other surnamed Wang, who were all riding horses at this moment. Although the conversation between the two had been kept as low as possible, it was also difficult to escape deliberate eavesdropping by someone with a heart. Huang quietly sat up in the carriage, pulled open a corner of the curtain of the carriage door, and peered out under the faint moonlight. Don't mention it, that expert was just about to set off when I went outside for convenience and saw him sitting in the front carriage. Hey, I thought I had invited a guest from a big sect. He's just an old man with gray hair, and his clothes look a bit stylish. It's better to invite him than to invite me, Lucy. Hee, Lucy, your words are a bit exaggerated, right? If Wang Hu doesn't come forward, it's up to you. Ah, right. With you and me, it's enough. Why do we need someone else to take action? With that spare money, why don't we share it with our brothers to have fun in the city? TSK, it's really a bargain for outsiders. Ha, that's indeed the truth. These two people seem to be full of nonsense, and the information revealed during the conversation left Huang in the car eavesdropping bewildered. She muttered a few words to herself, and a hint of unease grew in her heart. At this moment, a surprised look suddenly appeared from outside the curtain, which frightened Huang, and she quickly pretended to sleep. Wang Hu, what's wrong? Is there any movement? Lu Si, who was riding on the horse, turned around and looked at his companion with a surprised expression, and asked. Wang Hu paused for a moment on the curtain of the horse door and replied, "It's nothing, it feels like someone is watching us." Don't be paranoid anymore. Those little kids in the car in the middle of the night have already fallen asleep. There's no one staring at us. Come on, have a drink to refresh yourself. As he spoke, a wine jug fell into the other person's arms. After Wang Hu looked up and took a deep breath, he didn't care about it anymore. Alas, this period has been really not peaceful. It will be difficult to imagine living in the door like before in the future. Who said it's not right? In the past, this kind of hard work won't get us two brothers in one round. In such a remote and impoverished place, we have to send people to recruit disciples from every village to every household. The sect leader has dispatched 6, and Dongqing County may have to search all over. Lu Si, I remember your cousin was on duty outside the sect. It is said that the disciples who went on missions outside the sect at the beginning of the month suffered heavy casualties. Is this matter serious? This, Lu Si hesitated for a moment and nodded, is indeed true. What is the specific situation? 10 doesn't make 1. Lu Si gestured. Wang Hu was so scared that he almost fell off his horse's back and threw away the wine jug in his hand. Hey, don't throw it away if you don't drink it anymore. It cost me 2 coins. No wonder, I said, how could the sect suddenly send our inner disciples to recruit us, and the selection criteria are much more lenient than in previous years. In the end, this is the reason. Wang Hu said with lingering fear. Lu Si glanced at him and lifted the wine jug on the ground with his sword, comforting him, saying, Brother Wang Hu, don't panic. Although the disciples from our external sects have suffered a lot of losses and are almost destroyed, they are not doing well either. It's just a win-win situation. Besides, when the sky falls, those elders inside the sect are holding on. You're afraid they might do something wrong. You're talking about lightness. The outer gate has all been destroyed. Isn't it our turn as inner disciples next? What are you panicking about? Today, the sect has taken in more than 300 people in Qingyang town, and I estimate that there should be more than 1,000 people in the other 5 towns. If we send them to the sect for a little training for 2 or 3 years, then someone will take over again. They will naturally go out to work hard, and we too will still be comfortable living in the inner gate. Oh my God, take a look at these crooked melons and cracked dates collected today. They have the ability to fart. If it weren't for Director Zhang's advice to let the 2 of us drain the water, no one would have passed before. Wang Hu angrily pointed at the carriage and cursed. Shoo, keep your voice down for fear that others will hear you, right? Lu Si looked around and fortunately, the distance between the carriages was not small, so the sound did not reach the ears of other senior brothers. Later, he looked at Wang Hu, who was blushing and had a thick neck, and followed suit, saying, "Hey, what qualifications do you care about him? At least they can still be considered human." Wang Hu was probably choked on by the other person's words. After careful consideration, it seemed like this was the truth. Don't mention this, our task is to safely send them back to the sect, and the elders naturally have their own arrangements for the rest. Lu Si looked up and took a sip of wine, then turned to look at his absent-minded companion beside him, and suddenly laughed again. Wang Hu, do you still remember the little girl in the carriage? End of this chapter. Chapter 4. Immortal Master. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 4 Immortal Master. What's wrong with her? Wang Hu was stunned for a moment, not understanding why the other party suddenly asked such a question. I ask you, why did Director Zhang leave this little girl behind among so many people? Lu Sishen said mysteriously. Didn't Director Zhang say he wanted to buy her as a maid? TSK, you believe that too? Do you really need to buy a maid in such a place? Why is that? Haha, haven't you seen it? Deacon Zhang really has a heart for such a strange white-haired creature. Lu Si no longer covered it up and said openly, he's going to offer it to find the reward from the young master. Young master. Zhang Hu was surprised. The young master is the next leader's candidate, and his status is no longer below that of the elder. Let alone after succeeding as the leader, our Deacon Zhang may have already made plans and sought opportunities to please him. How could Director Zhang be like this? Wang Hu seemed a bit incredulous, which seemed different from his usual impression of that deacon. Truly no two. Who in the sect knows the preferences of the young master? That little girl has white hair and is also very beautiful. She was delivered to the young master's hand. TSK, I'm afraid she won't end up in any good situation. Director Zhang, this time, I'm afraid she's going to rise again, Lu Sipo said with emotion. At this moment, Wang Hu, who had regained his senses, let out a sigh of disgust and cursed softly, how noble I am when I treat him as Deacon Zhang. It turns out that he is also a follower of flattery. Are you not doing it? Lu Si asked in reverse. Me, Zhang Hu remained silent and gradually fell silent. He. Lu Si couldn't help but sneer as he looked at the other person's slightly struggling expression. The 2 of them didn't say much anymore, each with their own thoughts in their hearts, and continued on horseback. The road ahead was still long. Hua Ying's back was pressed against the cold wooden board, and the chill rising in her heart was even stronger compared to it. What a brief conversation between the 2 outside the carriage means is self-evident. She had thought that after entering the sect, she would be arranged to become a maid and then seek opportunities to practice martial arts, but she never expected such a change. Leaving aside the fact that the Huadao sect is recruiting disciples and disciples indiscriminately, attempting to fill the gap of lost disciples within the sect with these ordinary children, Lu Si was also greatly surprised by the meaning conveyed in and out of his words. Young Master. Although it is unclear what kind of preferences the young master has, it can also be heard from Lu Si that he is not very serious. Is it because you enjoy torturing people? Hua Ying has never been out of the village much since she was young, and her understanding of the outside world is mostly learned from the narratives of adults. When encountering this situation, she felt flustered and was also thinking about countermeasures. Do you want to escape? She looked around the carriage and looked at a few sleeping companions, including a stunner and a dog doll. If we really follow what those two people said, even if these children join the sect and stay for 2 or 3 years, they will just be risking their lives. Staying in this Huadao sect may not lead to any good results in the future. Lingzi, Lingzi, wake up, wake up. Huaying walked up to a child and woke him up. What's wrong with Sister Arya? Did she eat something? Lingzi only saw a black figure in the darkness, and it took him a while to confirm who it was. Lingzi, quickly call everyone up. I have something to say. Huaying's voice was very urgent, but she didn't dare to speak too loudly, afraid of startling the 2 disciples in blue outside. Oh. Lingzi was still confused and foolishly followed suit, shouting his companions out of their sleep one by one. What's wrong with me? Why are you calling me up? Have you arrived somewhere? Where are you? It's so dark, isn't it? 7 or 8 children gathered together, but none of them were clear-headed. They were all staring blankly, and you looked at me and I looked at you. Everyone, listen to me. Huaying was just about to tell everyone what she had just heard, but the carriage seemed to have hit something and suddenly shook. At the same time, the sound of horses hissing came from the carriage. Wang Hu, Lu Si, come with me quickly. In an instant, the originally silent mountains and forests suddenly became noisy. Shouting, the continuous sound of hooves, and the constant screams of children. Huaying could tell who the shouting was. It was the deacon Zhang. As soon as this person's stern voice arrived, Wang Hu and Lu Si immediately woke up half of the alcohol and hurriedly asked, Director Zhang, what happened? Oh, what else can it be? Director Zhang sneered, this flying fox sect is indeed not what the elder expected. It really took advantage of our sect's recruitment of disciples to come and cause trouble. You 2 quickly gather in front and follow orders. I will inform the other disciples. Yes. Wang Hu and Lu Si looked at each other and saw a look of shock from each other's application. They immediately rode forward. The Flying Fox sect is a local martial arts sect located in Linxian, Dongqing County. They have been entangled with the Huadao sect they belong to for decades, and there are often conflicts between the 2 sects, often resulting in the death of their disciples. At the beginning of this month, the confrontation was particularly severe, and this confrontation resulted in heavy losses for both sides. The reason why there were few disciples left outside the Huadao gate was because of this sect. Wang Hu, it seems that the news is true. This Flying Fox sect is really despicable. It took advantage of the night to launch a surprise attack. We are afraid that the 2 of us will suffer a big disaster tonight. Lu Si, are you afraid? Aren't you afraid? Don't blame me, brother. I didn't remind you. Be careful not to be hit by someone who doesn't have eyes when you rush forward. It's hard to defend against dark arrows in this big night. When the sky falls, there is a tall man standing against it. I want to see what kind of abilities the elder has invited. The 2 of them had reached the gathering point in front of the convoy while speaking, and dozens of inner disciples dressed in blue rushed over, in addition to more than 10 black-clad people. In addition, a group of people and horses seemed to be surrounded by the dense forest surrounded by darkness, and the cold soldiers shimmered with silver under the moonlight. Sun Dao Yang, don't hide. Even if you come, why don't you come out and see me? A middle-aged swordsman, who was leading the Huadao gate, shouted at the forest. Brotherly, you're safe and sound. It's really a coincidence that you and I met here tonight. A big man with a black face rode out of the forest, looking at him covered in dew, as if he had been waiting here for a long time. I didn't expect the Grand Flying Fox sect to send an elder to intercept us for such a small matter. It's really a big move, said the middle-aged swordsman in sharp opposition. If that's the case, we're just passing by. Brothers, come out and say hello to our Hall Masterly. The black-faced man smiled and waved towards the dense forest around him, and suddenly the sound of horse hooves and the clang of weapons echoed together. As more and more people and horses leaped out of the opponent's forest, far greater than his own side, the middle-aged swordsman on the horse's back also straightened his body and flashed out his weapons with a thud. "Stop talking nonsense. If you dare to ambush here today, be careful not to lose your life." "Oh. Brotherly, is there anything else he can't do? If there is, let's light it up early. Swords and swords have no eyes, and it's too late." The black-faced man laughed wildly and didn't pay any attention to the other party. "Humph." Masterly, knowing that he was not a match, did not dare to raise his head. He immediately turned around and bowed to a carriage behind him, saying in a respectful tone, "Please take action, Immortal Master." Wow! This shout was extremely loud, not only heard by the disciples on this side of the Huadao sect, but also by the people of the Flying Fox sect even further away, who were suddenly drenched in cold sweat. The leading black-faced man's eyelids twitched wildly and his heart throbbed. "Up! Don't talk nonsense, isn't the Immortal Master someone you can invite?" After speaking, he sandwiched his legs between the horse's belly and rushed up in 2 or 3 thrusts, ready to cut the lordly into 2 pieces with a knife. "Please take action, Immortal Master." At this moment, Master Li remained calm in the face of danger and continued to shout with an arched hand posture. Shwa! As the silver-colored big knife was about to strike him, a silver light shot out of the carriage, directly bouncing the black-faced big man's big knife open. "A person from Qingfeng Mountain is here, who dares to block my way." End of this chapter. Chapter 5. White-robed old Taoist. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 5. White-robed old Taoist. Accompanied by the sound of a thunderous bell, an old man in a white robe took the curtain and leaped into the air to the open space in front of the carriage. This person has a rosy complexion, crane hair and a childlike appearance. A wisp of white beard is as dense as the dust in his hand. At first glance, it looks quite like a fairy-like figure. "Master Xie, help." Master Li quickly dismounted and knelt down, without even looking at the big man behind him. The disciples of the Huadao sect around also dismounted one after another when they saw this, and the scene was very noisy for a moment. What kind of people are there among the righteous people of Qingfeng Mountain? The people present had never heard of it, but this did not prevent them from being shocked by the sound of Master Li's Immortal Master. What is an immortal teacher? That is a character that only exists in legends throughout the territory of Huaigua. The disciples on this side of the Feihu Gate were all panicked as they watched the legendary Immortal Master sitting in the Huadao Gate. They stopped and restrained their horses one by one, afraid to take another step forward. The black-faced man touched the gap on the blade, took a cold breath, and looked at the white-robed old man in front of him with a frightened expression. After a while, he spoke out. "Hiss, you old Taoist, what do you have to do with the grudges between the Flying Fox sect and the Huadao sect? Don't meddle in your affairs, otherwise I'll even chop you down." "Hee, young master, I advise you not to speak recklessly. If you obediently retreat, please spare your life." Zheng Yidao stroked his beard and said loudly. Upon hearing this, Master Li, who was kneeling on the ground, quickly said, "Immortal Master, don't let them go. They should all be hanged. Be talkative." Zheng Yidao's eyes crossed and he shouted loudly, which frightened Master Li from speaking more. "I am at a critical moment in my cultivation, so it is not advisable to kill too many lives. Of course, if there is anyone who doesn't have eyes, I don't mind leaving a few heads behind, Immortal Master." This old Taoist is truly amazing. In his words, the hundreds of disciples of the Flying Fox sect seem like nothing more than grass on the roadside. He rubs them as he pleases, which really makes everyone present shiver. Brothers, don't panic. This old Taoist must be bluffing. How could there be an Immortal Master in our territory? I think it's probably just that the martial arts masters from somewhere are pretending to be gods and playing ghosts. The black-faced man is worthy of being an elder of the sect, and he still has some courage. He first stabilized his military morale with a few words, then in a few words, he turned this old Taoist into a fraud, and then another round of orders. The enemy is outnumbered and our advantage lies in our side. Brothers, please follow me to kill this old scammer first, and the remaining disciples of the Hua Dao sect will slowly clean up. Okay. Young generation, dare you? The old Taoist in the white robe's face suddenly turned into a pig liver color. He has lived for so many years and has never been looked down upon so much. He is simply deceiving others too much. Brothers, come with me. The black-faced man immediately shouted. Kill. In an instant, hundreds of people waved weapons and killed the old man in the white robe together. The black-faced man led by him was even more fierce. He first rode his horse towards the leader of the Li Hall, wielding a large sword that directly took the opponent's head. Master Li's face was frightened and he quickly called for help. Immortal Master, save me. Humph, looking for death. Zhengyi Doran's expression was gloomy, and he didn't have time to think much. He even pinched out a magic formula in his hand and began to recite words in his mouth. Get up. In an instant, flying sand and rocks swept away, and a strong wind suddenly rose in the mountains and forests. The sand and stones in the sky rushed towards the people of Feihu Gate like a dragon roll. It's magic. This is magic. It's really an immortal master. Please spare your life, immortal master, spare your life. In an instant, the attack of the flying fox gate was shattered by this sudden gust of wind, causing hundreds of people to be thrown upside down, and some were even bruised and swollen by the sand and stones, causing them to complain incessantly. Ha ha ha, you see my immortal master's strength. You are really seeking your own death, said Qingyi, taking a long sigh of relief after casting the spell. His face seemed to have turned pale, but in this hazy night, others couldn't see clearly. Junior, don't waste my immortal master's time until you surrender. Damn it. Although the black-faced man was given a mouthful of yellow sand, he did not beg for mercy. Instead, he took the opportunity to charge forward and with a few steps, rushed to the old Taoist side, wielding his sword and slashing. Junior. Zhengyi Daoran was caught off guard by the sudden approaching of the black-faced man, and he let out a loud shout before easily pulling the nearby Master Li in front of him. Ah! With a scream, Master Li's eyes widened wide, and his brain was cut vertically from the middle, his sharp blade cutting to the end. The black-faced man was stunned and looked at the righteous Taoist who had been sprayed with blood in disbelief. What surprised him even more was that the old Taoist took advantage of his daze and threw the 2 petals of Master Li's body at him, then turned around and ran. Fortunately, he didn't react slowly either. He cursed at the old dog, kicked away Master Li, and chased after him with a knife, shouting while chasing. Brothers, quickly kill all the disciples of the Hua Dao sect and wait for Elder to retrieve this Taoist's head. The situation on the scene changed extremely quickly, and no one expected that the immortal master, who was still full of energy just now, had already fled. The remaining disciples of the Flying Fox sect also reacted and mounted their horses to fight against dozens of disciples of the Hua Dao sect. This battle is truly a destructive force. On the other side, Hua Ying and others huddled inside the carriage and occasionally looked out. Except for them, the children in the other carriages seemed to be startled by the sudden situation, and some even bravely went outside to explore. I think there's been a fight ahead. It's not like it's a mountain bandit, is it? Definitely, I heard my mother say that mountain bandits are the easiest to cause trouble in the mountains. So should we run? When the bandits come down the mountain, they won't let us go. Gua, you coward. With the senior experts of the Hua Dao sect around, the mountain bandits must have nothing to do with us. I. A few children were arguing together, while Hua Ying was observing the situation in the distance alone. She remembered what the deacon had just said. The current situation was not a bandit coming, but a struggle between two sections. Everyone, be prepared, and if things don't go well, hurry up and run outside the mountain. Jia, where can we go? The mountains are full of wolves and tigers. I think it's better to stay in the car for safety, Erlingzi worried. Staying in the car is not safe either. Hua Ying said calmly. Who knows which side of the people will be killed later? If that flying fox gate gains the upper hand, I'm afraid these children won't end up well either. Of course, with good luck, the flying fox gate may catch them back, but Hua Ying dare not gamble. The struggle between these sects is completely unreasonable. The person I intercepted today and the person you intercepted tomorrow are completely different from the righteous and prestigious sects she imagined. No matter which side she joins, it may be difficult to survive in the end. End of this chapter. Chapter 6. Demon Road. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 6. Demon Road. I think you're just scared. If you want to leave, you can go. Sun Ergo is the oldest among these children. Seeing that the children seemed to be moved by Hua Ying, he couldn't help but speak out and mock them. Huadao sect is our largest sect. How can a few mountain bandits take them? Wait and see, the seniors will be back soon. As you please. Hua Ying didn't argue with him, she had nothing to say about such a person, and continued to focus on the outside situation. Erlangzi, you can follow me later. Oh, I'll listen to your area sister. The child nodded foolishly. After another moment, the noise outside suddenly increased, and more children walked out of the carriage to observe the situation. Hua Ying increasingly felt something was wrong and followed her out. 100 or 200 children crowded on this mountain path, some discussing and some crying loudly, making a lot of noise. At this moment, children from several carriages in front of the distant carriage queue suddenly rushed towards them, shouting and rushing. Everyone, hurry up. The mountain bandits are here to kill. Boom. The crowd suddenly exploded, and all the children rushed around with their heads in their arms, crying in an instant. Run away, you idiot. Hua Ying's reaction was not slow at all, and she ran towards the back of the convoy with a few children. Erlingzi and Gua were shouting loudly, afraid that they might fall behind and be attacked by the mountain bandits who were chasing them. Sun Ergu was originally squatting in the carriage, but when he saw something was wrong, he immediately ran towards the forest and ran faster than anyone else, disappearing in the blink of an eye. Hua Ying and others didn't have the time to care about his life and death, so they fled towards the outside of the mountain. Not far behind the few people, a white-robed old Taoist rushed towards them amidst the crowd of children. The black-faced man chased after him relentlessly, shouting and cursing. Old thief, don't leave. Take a knife from Elder Ben. Don't bully others too much, young master. When I regain my vitality, I will definitely kill you to the bottom. The old Taoist in the white robe dodged a slash and then kicked several children blocked in the middle of the road, shouting incessantly. Get out of here, Master Immortal. Don't get in the way. A few children who couldn't dodge were instantly kicked away by him a few feet away, and then he casually picked up a few children and threw them behind him. Up. The black-faced man thought that the other party had used some hidden weapon, so he slashed and screamed in agony, crying even louder. Damn it, demon way. The black-faced man glanced at what he was chopping, and immediately became angry and quickly kicked the opponent to the ground. The white-robed Taoist took advantage of the situation and climbed 2 or 3 zhang in a row. After getting up, he threw a few children back, making the black-faced man grin in anger. The bandits killed. The bandits killed. Run away. These young children had never seen such a bloody scene before, and were all frightened and mentally disturbed, causing even greater panic. The old Taoist took advantage of the chaos and kicked away a few children, fleeing towards the foot of the mountain in an instant, while still embarrassing himself behind him. The black-faced man also turned red in his eyes, ignoring the fact that his hands were stained with several innocent lives. He waved his big knife and chased forward with all his might. The two of them were extremely fast, and in the blink of an eye, they ran half a mile away. Along the way, blood flowed into a river, and there were mournful swans everywhere. Huaying and others, who were running at the front, felt a chill when they heard the screams from behind. Several children with weak feet stumbled over each other and rolled together into a ball. Erlingzi was unlucky and was grabbed by one of the fallen children at the bottom of his pants, falling to the ground. Jie, help me, woo-woo. Huaying gritted her teeth and stopped walking when she heard her companion's cries for help. She turned around and forcefully pulled the other person out of the crowd. Let's go quickly. Huaying, who had been running for a long time and was already weak, was already exhausted. After pulling Erlingzi out, she was panting uncontrollably. The cold wind blew, and sweat adhered to her clothes, making her shiver cold. Arya, I don't seem to be able to run anymore. You can leave on your own first, Erlingzi cried on the ground. Huaying's pale face showed a hint of helplessness, and she couldn't have any strength now. There were also some physically strong children running past the two of them, and they could only watch helplessly as the other children escaped. Huaying knelt in place, watching helplessly as an old man in a blood-stained white robe rushed towards her in the distance, followed closely by a big man who was also bathed in blood. She fell into silence. The faint sound of these two people can still be heard. He, Junior, if you chase after me again, the immortals won't be able to save you. Stop talking nonsense and take your life. The black-faced man, dragging his already sharpened sword, attacked the white-robed Taoist, but was deftly dodged by the opponent. The Taoist in the white robe had a sly smile on his face and said, "What's wrong? I can't cut it now." As he spoke, the Taoist casually grabbed a child and threw it back, and the black-faced man also cut it off without fail. The Taoist in the white robe couldn't help but sigh and say, "Tisk tsk, you are really ruthless. You wouldn't let go of such a young child. This immortal master is very heartbroken, very heartbroken. Death to the old thief." The black-faced man was extremely angry, and the two quickly chased after Huaying and the others. The old Taoist saw that there were still a few children around him who could defend themselves, and without hesitation, he grabbed them and threw them over. Ah! Accompanied by a few screams, Huaying saw a scene that shocked her extremely. The children who fled with her, including Erlingzi and Goa, the children who set out from the village together, and their playmates who had grown up playing since childhood, were thrown out like garbage by this unknown Taoist. And the black-faced man waved a blood knife, but with just a few casual thrusts, the few children collapsed on the ground like broken burlap bags. She trembled all over, not only because of the cold, but also because of fear and despair. Lungzi. At this moment, the big black-faced man's big knife had been completely scrapped, and he casually abandoned it to the side, wiped the blood stains on his face, and kicked the old Taoist standing next to Huaying with bare hands and feet. "I see where you're running this time. Hee. The old Taoist was unusually unmoved when faced with this kick, and as the attack approached, he instantly grasped a magic spell in his hand. The next moment. Bang! The black-faced man's face lit up with joy, and the thick touch on his feet made him realize that he had hit the opponent hard, and the victory had been decided. I saw the body of the white-robed Taoist being kicked away 3 or 4 zhang away. The black-faced man didn't hold it too high and quickly approached to make up for a few moves to prevent future troubles. However, what he didn't expect was the chilling voice of the white-robed Taoist coming from behind. Hee, Junior, where are you looking? The black-faced man was suddenly startled in his heart, quickly turned around, and then welcomed an extremely hot flame. How could it be? With a loud bang, the black-robed man's body suddenly flew out, and with an extremely miserable scream, his entire body was burned to ashes by the sudden flames. Hee, I told you earlier that even chasing immortals can't save you. The old Taoist stood not far away, but his white robe was nowhere to be seen. He saw that the big man in the distance was lifeless, and immediately released the spell he had pinched in his hand. "TSK, it really takes a lot of effort. I knew I would have encountered such a rough guy who wouldn't interfere with the trouble here. The big enemy has been solved, and the old Taoist is not prepared to stay here any longer. If the people from the Flying Fox sect catch up later, it will be really difficult to clean up. Oh, where is my immortal master's robe?" The old Taoist in the white robe was about to pick up the robe that had been stripped of its golden shell to deceive the black-faced man before, when he suddenly realized that the robe, which was supposed to be on the ground, had disappeared. Not seen together, there was also a little girl who was casually caught by him as a substitute. End of this chapter. Chapter 7. Qingpi Li. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 7. Qingpi Li. Waking up in a daze, Huaying covered the sharp pain in her abdomen, and the pungent bloody smell in her mouth almost made her vomit. "What's going on? Where is this?" she murmured to herself, suppressing the pain and using her arms to support her body as she climbed up from the ground. Huaying only remembers being caught by the white-robed Taoist before she fell into a coma, but now that the white-robed Taoist is gone, not just him, but everyone is gone. Under my feet was soft soil, and not far away was thick mist floating around. Looking up, I could still see the starry sky dotted with stars. This seems to be another world. Huaying suddenly panicked. She ignored the cramping in her abdomen and spat out the remaining blood in her mouth, carefully probing towards the mist around her. However, as soon as it touched the mist, it shrank back into a large block like spirituality. Huaying saw a reaction and quickly took a step inside. Is anyone there? There was no sound for half a day, and even movement could be heard. Strange. Huaying dared not venture into the mist, and after exploring for a while, she could only continue to stay in the original open space. She checked her condition. The abdomen should have been kicked by someone, it's very painful, and the mouth is still coughing up blood. It should be a considerable internal injury. That person must have done it. Thinking of the white-robed old Taoist who had killed her companion, Huaying was so angry that her teeth itched, wishing she could devour him alive. By the way, the clothes on his body seemed to be his. Huaying disdainfully took off the blood-stained Taoist robe and threw it into the thick fog in anger. After a while, as if remembering something, he crawled into the thick fog and picked up the robe. Gently trembling, my little hand touched inside and soon came out with a heavy booklet. Besides, there are also a few taels of silver coins. Huaying first glanced at the silver, then shifted her gaze to the book. Qingpi Li. There are 3 big characters on the book cover, and Huaying tried to pronounce them. Unfortunately, the little girl didn't know much words and could only recognize half of the 3 words, so she reluctantly read them out. Qingpi Li. Is this a martial arts secret script? Huaying felt a surge of passion in her heart and couldn't wait to open the first few pages of the book. What caught her eye were more words and a few incomprehensible pictures. Although she had only a partial understanding of the text in the book and was also at a loss for the illustrations depicting villains, Huaying understood that this was undoubtedly a legendary martial arts secret. Unfortunately, I don't recognize many words. Shaking his head, he temporarily put down the secret script in his hand. Huaying understands her current situation very well. If she can't get out, even if there are good martial arts secrets, it won't help. Sigh. With a light sigh, Huaying began a new round of exploration. Unfortunately, she had been busy for another hour, searching for everything she could find here, but couldn't find any living creatures. Apart from the mist and the land, there is only the unchanging starry sky above. Strangely, although it is under the starry sky here, it is as bright as day, and even after so long, there is no change, as if it has always been static. Let's eat something first. Huaying rubbed her stomach and took out 1.5 mantu from her bosom. She had no strength to escape before. Fortunately, there are still mantu to satisfy her hunger. Fortunately, it's a half mantu. Otherwise, I would have to starve to death in this desolate place. Woo. Hua-ying chews mantu and thinks about where to get some water later. At this time, she was taking out mantu in her arms when she suddenly found that something was missing from her arms. Ha! Where's my jade pendant? Jade pendant. This morning Hua-ying picked up a patterned jade pendant by the river. She had it in her arms at the time, but now she can't find it. After searching for a while, I flipped through my arms but couldn't find it. Did you lose it while running away? Thinking of this, Hua-ying muttered to herself a pity. That jade pendant may not be very beautiful, but it should also be very valuable. If I had known it would be lost, I would have given it to my parents before going out. The more Hua-ying thought about it, the more angry she became. Even the mantu was no longer delicious. She lay depressed on the ground and watched the stars. Although it's quiet here and there's no sign of danger, it's just too boring. The stars in the sky don't move. It's a pity not to grow anything to eat on such good land. Hua-ying touched the soil under her body and couldn't help but let out a deep sigh. Not long after, under the mysterious starry sky, Hua-ying, who had filled her stomach, hugged her body tightly and fell into a deep sleep. I don't know if we can go back, Dad, Mom. A cold wind blew and woke up Hua-ying from her sleep. She widened her eyes and looked up at the sky. Although it is still a bright starry sky, the starry sky in front of me is completely different from before. A crescent moon hangs high, and silver moonlight spreads across the mountains. Am I back now? Hua-ying jumped up with surprise, but looking around, she instantly felt like she was falling into an ice cave, trembling all over. The damaged carriage, scattered weapons, and the bloody scenes that made the young girl fall to the ground like hell, unable to recover for a long time. It seems like a long time has passed, and all the people from the Hua Dao sect and the Flying Fox sect have disappeared. The strong smell of blood also confirms that this place has just experienced a major war. Apart from the innocent children lying on the ground, there are also many corpses of adult men dressed in blue and black clothes. Everyone is dead, everyone is dead. Hua-ying sat slumped on the ground, muttering to herself as she looked around at the scene. At this moment, she was both fearful and grateful. If it weren't for suddenly entering that place filled with white mist, there would probably have been an unnamed corpse here. Thinking of this, she suddenly realized something and began to grope on the ground. Sure enough, a small jade pendant fell to the ground unharmed. Perhaps it was because it was too ordinary, or perhaps the scene was too chaotic. The lost jade pendant was not picked up by anyone, but instead lay quietly here. Hua-ying picked it up, raised it above her head, and examined it under the moonlight. Strange, there seems to be a little blood color. She observed for a while before suddenly thinking of something. When I was unconscious before, I seemed to accidentally spit blood on the jade pendant, and then the pendant emitted a strange blue light. By the way, there must be a problem with Qingyang. Hua-ying quickly understood that it must have been this jade pendant that saved her life, sent her to another place, and now she has sent her back. This jade pendant is definitely not simple, maybe it's the legendary treasure. As she spoke, Hua-ying began to frown and ponder. But how exactly is this jade pendant used? Is it possible that when you fall asleep, you can go to another place? End of this chapter. Chapter 8. Cultivation. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 8 Cultivation. Seeing that she couldn't figure it out for a while, Hua-ying didn't think much anymore and cherished the jade pendant in her arms to protect it. This is a life-saving treasure, you can't lose it. The wind swept by. Erlengzi, Goa. You guys, in the darkness, Hua-ying found the bodies of her fellow villagers and couldn't help but kneel down and cry bitterly when she saw that their companions were already lifeless. That damn Taoist and that black-faced man are all despicable and despicable. We must seek revenge. Huaying gritted her teeth, clenched her fists, and vividly remembered the appearance of the two in her mind. She secretly swore that if she had the ability in the future, she would take revenge on her enemies and avenge these dead children. Not only for the silly little dog dolls, but also for the innocent children of other villages who suffered. The events of tonight are unforgettable. After a long silence, Huaying finally got up and left. She really wanted to find a place to bury Erlingzi and the others, but without tools, there was nothing anyone could do about it. In addition, the howling of wolves, tigers, and leopards in the mountains and forests became even more mournful, so she dared not stay here any longer. She endured her grief and anger and turned around to run down the mountain. It was already early in the morning, and the sky was hazy. Many wild beasts emerged from the gradually silent mountains and forests to feed on this lonely cemetery, which was both desolate and full of vitality. The roar of beasts lasted for a long time. In the blink of an eye, the sun rose 3 times, and the yang energy cleared away the morning mist in the mountains, as well as removing a lot of gloomy blood. Huaying hid in a natural shallow cave at the foot of the mountain, covering the entrance with a large stone. She lay inside, exhausted, for 2 or 3 hours before waking up. She had intended to run to the crowded village in one breath, but unfortunately, the weather was not good and her physical strength was not very strong, so she didn't run too far, just found a cave to hide in. She didn't sleep soundly that night. The howling of wolves and tigers outside was very frightening, and she didn't even have a solid nightmare. Huaying only hoped to be taken by the Jade Pendant to another place after falling asleep, but to her disappointment, the miracle did not happen. It's strange. Can't you pass when you fall asleep? Huaying woke up with a jade pendant in her hand and couldn't help muttering, "Take me there quickly, Jade Pendant, Jade Pendant. I left half of my manta there and didn't bring it out." After enduring all night, tired and hungry, Huaying peeked out of the cave when she saw the sun outside. She first found some dew nearby to drink, and then began to search for something to eat. Fortunately, there were many wild fruit trees in the mountains. She picked a lot, ate some, and kept some in her arms. "It's so sour, this fruit is really sour." Huaying remembers that this red wild fruit can be eaten and is non-toxic, but in her impression, she has never tasted it so sour, as if it was not ripe. Of course, now is not the time to be disgusted. Being able to fill one's stomach is the most important thing. After finishing her meal, Huaying returned to the cave and began to contemplate her next plans. Go home, she must be going home. But which direction should we go? She originally remembered the way she came, but after entering the mountains, she completely lost herself. I don't know what the Huadao gate is hiding from, but after entering the mountain, it turns around and takes small paths, making people feel dizzy. Huaying recalled for a moment that she might be heading west. No, it should be heading south. Is it heading south? She had a question in her heart. Okay, let's try walking south for now. If you encounter someone on the way, ask them for directions. If you make a big mistake, you can just turn back. As for how long it will take to walk. Coming out of Qingyang town, the carriage walked for a short while, and the journey was quite fast, probably 200 to 300 miles away. Huaying broke her fingers and calculated that if she walked back, she would have to walk for at least a few days to arrive. This is still under the condition of not taking the wrong path, and if we go wrong, it will take even longer. Sigh. With a sigh, Huaying stuffed a fruit into her mouth to refresh herself. Anyway, I have to go back to the village. When I go back, I won't say anything. The outside world is too scary. Anyway, I have a secret script in my hand. Even if I can practice martial arts well in the village when I can read it well. Thinking of that martial arts secret book, Huaying couldn't help but enjoy it for a while. Although that white-robed Taoist is very despicable, she has also left something good for her, hasn't she? She secretly pondered in her heart that once she had mastered martial arts, she would use her martial arts skills to avenge her companions and personally destroy that person. By the way, I haven't brought the book Qingpi Li over there yet. Suddenly remembering something, Huaying covered her little head in frustration. If I had known I couldn't go back, I should have carried that book in my arms and kept it safe. How could I have casually thrown it on the ground? There must be a way to go back, it's just that I haven't noticed yet. Huaying picked up the jade pendant again and observed, her eyes wide open as she stared at it intently, gritting her teeth as if she wished to swallow it alive. Go over. Go over. Let me go over now. She murmured in a low voice, focused, and at the same time, a scene of white mist came to her mind. With a swoosh. At this moment, a faint blue light suddenly flashed through the cave, and the jade pendant fell to the ground with a soft sound. The little girl who was originally sitting on the ground disappeared with the blue light. On the other side. Am I here? Huaying stared at the suddenly changed scene around her. The dark cave turned into white fog. The hard rocks at her feet also turned into warm soil. When she raised her head, it was the starry sky. At her feet, there was a book and half a mantu. So, can you just come over with a silent chant? Huaying looked at her empty palm and let out a soft sigh. Why wouldn't the jade pendant come along? Can it only stay in its original place? What if someone picks it up? Thinking of this, she silently thought to herself and went back. In the next moment, the scene in Huaying's eyes flashed away, and in an instant, she returned to the original cave. She bent down to pick up the jade pendant on the ground and said strangely, "That's really the case. It seems we need to use it carefully in the future, so as not to have the jade pendant picked up by others when we go there." After making plans in her heart and deciding not to easily use this jade pendant in the future, Huaying silently recited, and the person came to the other side. What a treasure! In the future, if you encounter danger, you can just hide here, hee. He happily picked up the secret script and mantu. Huaying couldn't help but chew it, and turned it over. Although she didn't read much, she still read many words from the book by relying on half of the characters. The first article of the secret script seems to teach people how to cultivate, and practitioners can extract something called spiritual power, and use it for themselves. Huaying thought to herself that this must be the internal power in martial arts. I heard that experts with deep internal power can injure people from afar, but I don't know if it's true or false. So, reading the half-cooked text and combining it with the illustrations in the book, Huaying tried to practice according to the steps in the book. This book, Qingpi Li, seems to be indeed a true martial arts secret script. In just a short moment, she felt a wave of heat circulating in her abdomen, giving people a feeling of transforming food. However, the duration of this heat is very short, and it cannot be felt as soon as it warms up. Huaying was not discouraged, but instead became more and more excited as she practiced. The figure in the scholar's painting sat up with her eyes closed, and this practice lasted for an unknown amount of time. End of this chapter. Chapter 9. Wild Fruits. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 9. Wild Fruits. The time for cultivation passed quickly, and when Huaying opened her eyes again, her surroundings remained unchanged. There was no distinction between black and white, and if it weren't for her hunger, she wouldn't have stopped either. There were still some wild fruits in her arms, and she casually stuffed a few into her mouth to fill her stomach. After finishing her meal, Huaying picked up the book and continued flipping through it. There are many areas that she cannot understand, to the extent that she cannot determine whether her cultivation has been effective. It seems that finding a way to read is the key, otherwise we wouldn't be able to continue practicing. With a regretful sigh, Huaying closed the book and stuffed it into her arms, then silently recited. The next figure came to the original cave. The jade pendant lay intact in the distance. After putting it away, she went to the entrance of the cave, moved away the blocked stones, and prepared to go outside to see the situation. Oh, it seems like my strength has increased significantly. When moving the stone, Huaying clearly felt much more relaxed, which made her feel a bit joyful and strengthened her determination to continue practicing. Oh, it's already dark. Stepping out of the cave entrance, it was already late at night outside, with the moon and stars sparse. At the foot of the mountain, it was quiet, and occasional insect calls could be heard from the bushes. Huaying couldn't help but marvel at the passage of time. She didn't expect that after only practicing for a short while, a whole day had already passed. No wonder she was so hungry so quickly. It was too dark at night, and she dared not venture out to search for wild fruits, so she decided to return to the cave. I originally wanted to lie down and sleep on the spot, but the night was too cold. When Huaying left the house, her clothes were thin and she couldn't resist the gradually cold weather, so she had to rely on the jade pendant to go back to the other side. As soon as it passed, Huaying keenly realized something was wrong. Still under the starry sky, surrounded by white mist and half an acre of land, everything seems normal, but how could there be a few small saplings here? Huaying rubbed her eyes and stared at the things on the land not far in front of her without blinking. That are a few saplings, just growing a few green leaves, about half a person tall, looking vibrant and emitting a faint fluorescence, very spiritual. I remember not having it before. Huaying remembers very clearly that when she came here a few times before, the land was clearly bare, and she regretted not planting something on such good land. She didn't expect that something had really grown just a while ago. Still a watery sapling, as if suddenly jumping out of the soil, growing terrifyingly fast. Huaying bravely approached and curiously lay there, observing carefully. A scene that surprised her even more appeared, where the seedlings were growing at a visible speed and pulling up. In just a moment, they sprouted lateral branches, tender buds emerged, and the leaves were green and tender. How could such a thing happen? Huaying couldn't help but smack her tongue. The rapid growth rate was truly unheard of, even the fastest growing crop she had ever seen had such an astonishing speed. The small saplings grew bigger and bigger, and Huaying couldn't rest anymore. She stuck there like a stick and continued to observe for a long time, until several saplings grew taller than her, before finally regaining her senses in a daze. She looked at these saplings more and more familiar, always feeling like she had seen them somewhere before. By the way, isn't this the wild fruit trees I picked? The familiar shape of the leaves and the green and astringent fruit that had just begun to bear made her feel incredibly familiar. Huaying carefully recalled for a moment that the wild fruit she had eaten before seemed to have been casually left with its core here. Is that so? A bold idea arose in the little girl's mind, and then it exploded uncontrollably. Is it really the saplings of that wild fruit tree? To confirm her thoughts, Huaying sat cross-legged in front of the saplings, quietly waiting for the moment when the wild fruits ripened. As time passed, I don't know how long it took. The fruit trees grew taller and taller, and the green fruits slowly turned red. A faint fruity aroma spread and filled the entire space. Huaying looked at the very tall fruit tree in front of her, feeling shocked. At the same time, she slowly stepped forward, carefully climbed up the tree, and picked a few fruits. Taking a light bite, the familiar fruity aroma instantly filled her mouth. What surprised her even more was that this fruit was not as sour and bitter as before, but rather very sweet and fragrant, with a taste that was comparable to other fruits on the market. You should know that this is a wild fruit in the mountains. Huaying can't even name it. She only knows that in the past, adults would only go up the mountain to pick this wild fruit to satisfy their hunger when there was a famine in the village. On weekdays, no one would specifically pick this wild fruit and take it home to eat, because the taste of this fruit is really astringent, and even mature ones rarely have a sweet taste. The half-cooked one she picked in the mountains before has an indescribable bitterness, and if it weren't for being extremely hungry, no one would eat it. It smells so good. Is this still a wild fruit? Huaying ate one fruit after another and murmured to herself. This fruit is so delicious that she can't even be sure if it's from the seeds of that wild fruit, but if it's not, how could this land grow saplings out of thin air? It was really unbelievable at that time. Huaying stood under the tree, looking up at the fruits hanging from the branches, feeling inexplicably complex in her heart. This jade pendant I accidentally picked up is not just a treasure, it's simply an immortal object. Do those fairy tales really exist? Is this jade pendant a treasure of immortals? Immortal. For Huaying, this is a legendary existence that is even more legendary than the elders of the Huadao sect. The adults in the village hardly mention it, and the only one willing to talk about it is the teacher invited by the village. Whenever the teacher talks about it, she and the children in the village listen to it as interesting stories, such as the fairy moving mountains, the fairy catching ghosts, and the fairy flying with swords. Every time they hear it, it makes the children both yearn and feel absurd. Is there really a fairy? Thinking of this, Huaying shook her head. It was impossible to understand such an irrelevant matter. Instead of considering whether the immortal existed, it was better to first clarify the current situation. After the wild fruit tree grows, its growth rate slows down. On the contrary, those fruits ripen very quickly. After the first round of fruit ripens, it falls to the ground on its own and then begins to produce new fruits. The new fruit has a larger size and more quantity, but it seems that it is precisely because there are too many that the second round of fruit ripening slows down a lot. When Huaying picked up all the fruits on the ground and piled them up into a small mountain, the trees were still green with no signs of maturity. It seems that the growth has slowed down. Huaying stood beside the pile of fruits piled up in the mountains, staring blankly at a few wild fruit trees. Although she noticed some changes in the fruit tree, she didn't think much about it. She just thought that the fruit tree needed to rest when it was tired. After all, she had never heard of anyone's fruit tree that could always bear fruit. With so many wild fruits, I won't be afraid of going hungry on my way, hee. Sitting with so many wild fruits, Huaying felt immensely happy, and she wished she could dive into the pile of fruits and sleep soundly. End of this chapter. Chapter 10. Girls. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 10. Girls. The next morning. The morning mist did not dissipate, and a few sudden bird songs disrupted the tranquility in the mountains. In the mist, the young figure of 18 or 19 years old rushed out of the dense forest with a wheezing sound, running south without looking back, as if someone was chasing her behind her in a hurry. 2 roaring hooves came, accompanied by the shouts of men. This little girl is really sneaking away. Senior brotherly, please stop her from the side and don't let her run away. Don't worry, she can't run. Drive. Listening to the sound coming closer and closer behind her, Huaying quickly slipped into the nearby bushes and quickly chose a path to escape to the other side. Damn it. You really know how to hide, go over there and chase after me. A young man in blue rode up and couldn't help but curse as he looked at the figure escaping from the bushes. On the other hand, a disciple of the Huadao sect surnamed Li had already circled the path to the front, holding a whip and shouting at the forest, "Little girl, don't run away. The 2 of us are disciples of the Huadao sect and have been ordered to take you back to the sect. Don't panic. Senior brotherly, stop talking nonsense to her. This girl doesn't eat either soft or hard. I told her so hard just now that I don't know what kind of magic she's got, and she just runs away without listening." At this moment, the previous blue-clad disciple also arrived. How could that be? Did you go crazy from being scared that night? Senior brotherly asked. Who knows, none of the dozens of children found in the past 2 days have escaped as desperately as she did, probably because they have not really been stimulated. It's okay, if she doesn't listen, she can forcibly take it away. Alas, this time the sect was attacked by the Flying Fox sect and suffered heavy losses. I don't know if the remaining dozens of children can handle it. In the forest, Huaying, hidden behind a tree, was panting heavily as she leaned over to listen to the conversation between 2 young men in blue outside. Upon hearing their conversation, she couldn't help but feel a chill in her heart. The Huadao sect has been searching for these surviving children all along. It seems that they suffered a great loss that day, otherwise even the remaining children would not have been forcibly taken back. Huaying doesn't want to go back with them. Now that she has the secret script and the treasures of immortals, there will naturally be opportunities for cultivation in the future. Why go to that sect to die? However, these two people are not friendly, and if they continue to escape, it may be difficult to shake them off. Huaying had thought about getting into the Jade Pendant, but she was very worried that it would fall into the hands of these two people. If they found out they had picked it up, it would really be more or less unlucky. We need to find a way to run further away. If we rush in at such a close distance, it's easy to find the Jade Pendant. Huaying took another breath and looked around, searching for the best escape route. Fortunately, there is still some fog in the mountains now, otherwise it would be really difficult to hide here. Taking a gentle breath, Huaying picked up a few pieces of gravel from the ground. She first peeked at the two people outside the forest, then threw a stone in the opposite direction and turned around to run on the other side. Over there. Hurry up. The sound made by the first stone caught the attention of the two disciples of the Huadao sect. Unfortunately, these two were not foolish either. They saw at a glance that this was a trick of deceiving others. Then, they quickly found the position of Huaying and rode forward. Huaying dared not walk on the main road, as it was too easy for the horse to catch up. She had to hide in the middle of the woods and shrubs, occasionally throwing a stone to distract her attention and seize the opportunity to run. She was not easily caught up within this round and round, but she also did not distance herself. As she watched the forest gradually expand out of the valley, it became thinner and the mist around her began to dissipate. Huaying couldn't help but feel a heavy feeling in her heart. The two of them rode horses at an extremely fast speed and caught up in the blink of an eye. Ha ha ha, where are you running, little girl? How dare you play with me too? You'll have to suffer later. The young man in blue let out a strange cry, and as he swung his whip, the surrounding branches and shrubs were cut off one after another. At the next moment, the whip in the young man's hand caught sight of the target and without hesitation drew towards the fleeing figure like a deer. Huaying thought to herself that something was wrong. Her sweating palm tightly grasped the jade pendant and was about to bet on whether it would be discovered when suddenly a burst of air came from afar. Whoosh! Ah! The young man in blue on the back of the horse suddenly let out a painful cry, and then surprisingly, he flew backwards and fell heavily onto a tree. What kind of person? Senior Brother Li was startled and screamed out loud. He instantly drew his sword to protect his chest and stared at a distance of several tens of meters ahead. However, what he received was another burst of emptiness. Whoosh! Although it was obstructed by the sword, this Senior Brother Li was still thrown away by the tremendous force, and the sword in his hand shattered in response. Cough, please spare your life, Senior. Although he had not seen him, the seasoned Senior Brother Li did not understand that his two brothers had encountered a master at this moment, which instantly made them lose their combat power. Such martial arts skills may not be able to find many people in the entire Yongzhou. Get lost. From afar, a light and ethereal female voice came, piercing their eardrums and causing them to almost crack open. They dared not stay here, and they all hurriedly crossed their horses and fled towards the distance. Huaying lay on the ground, exhausted and panting heavily. As she watched the two members of the Huadao sect flee in a hurry, she seemed unaware of what had happened. She lay there for a long time to confirm that the danger had been lifted, and her tightly held palm relaxed accordingly. The wheels rolled and gradually, the sound of horse hooves accompanied the rolling of the wheels closer and closer, followed by a crisp sound that reached Huaying's ear. Master, it's a little girl. Even younger than me, those two bad guys are really despicable. Jier, please help her up. Oh. Not long after, a gentle footsteps ran over, and at the same time, a kind-hearted and slightly strange girl's voice rang out. Whose child are you from? Why are you being chased by bad people? Listening, Huaying suddenly felt a pair of delicate palms supporting her waist, and then gently lifted herself up from the ground. Huaying leaned over and saw a black-haired sister dressed in white walking curiously. Not very old, looking like 12 or 13 years old, with a beautiful appearance and a touch of cuteness. The clear eyes reveal innocence, and the expression is full of care. Huaying looked at the other person and forgot her words for a while. Why aren't you talking? Are you scared? No, 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 Huaying hurriedly said. Oh, are you okay then? Did you get hurt somewhere? The girl continued to ask. Huaying shook her head. The girl was delighted to hear this, her eyebrows and eyes curved, and she turned her head to shout at the carriage of the carriage, Master, she's okay. It's really great. Bring her in and I'll take a look. End of this chapter.